InDigital is on a mission to improve the 911 industry. Our goal is to create something better to go above and beyond the current standards. Our passion for creating the most advanced, well-designed solutions led to our position as an industry leader in next-gen core services. For the millions of calls processed over our emergency IP networks, to our Text for 911 solution, Texty, to our disaster recovery and backup solution, Mevo, it's easy to see we love what we do. For more information, check us out at www.indigital.net.
Rapid Deploy believes that every public safety agency, regardless of size, should have access to the data they need when it matters most. That's why, since 2016, our mission has been to reduce emergency response times and improve public safety. We are the industry's only integrated emergency response platform. Our web-based cloud platform includes analytics, mapping, dispatch, and mobile apps, purpose-built for 911 in the 21st century. Visit www.rapiddeploy.com to learn how we enable effective, efficient, data-driven emergency response.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 339 of Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and as always, a big thanks to all of the patrons for everything that you do, for the new patrons that have signed on, for those who have continued to just support and do everything that you do. Thank you all so much for it. I appreciate it. We've got episodes that are coming out like crazy, a bunch of announcements that are coming up, as well as Dare to Be Great 2. All kinds of things with Dare to Be Great 2. The schedule is complete. The industry partners are joining up. We have the 3 diamond sponsors for the conference. And once this comes out, that information will have been out already. So I'll just go ahead and say it. A big thanks to diamond sponsors InDigital, Rapid Deploy, and Evans Consoles for sponsoring. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. So just everything that you do, it's going to be awesome. There's going to be a bunch of stuff that's coming out. The virtual expo hall is going to be superb. So look out for that and all of the other information coming for Dare to Be Great too. Now for my guest. We've known each other for a few years now, and we've been in a couple sessions together, which were a lot of fun during Imagine Listening as well as Open Mic Live. So my guest today is Tom, and he's a retired communications director out of Indiana. Hey.
Hey, good morning to you, Ricardo. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Awesome. Pretty well. Thank you very much.
How does it feel to be retired, man?
It's hard to tell. You know, like we talked in the past, and one of the hardest decisions of the day a lot of times is to decide which T-shirt that I'm going to wear, and that's only if I'm going out of the house, of course. So, between all my house chores, that's it's tough, but it's a gig. I will have to say that.
That is good, especially to have a decision like that. I mean, I can dig that. I can dig it. Now, you have like over 44 years of experience, and if I remember correctly, you started out in dispatch early on, and then continued in public safety and doing so many different things. You and I had a conversation last week, but I want to go through your story and talk about a bunch of different things, especially how technology has changed from then till now. You were communications director out of Indiana here for a while, and you guys also used the Text 911 platform that's available here in the state. So the technology from then to now and how to get different pathways to emergency services has changed. But again, with those 44 years of experience, I want to go back in time, and I want to know how you got into public safety to begin with.
Well, that's a good one. Uh, Let me back up a couple of years prior to that. I was working for a basically for an asphalt company. We were laying asphalt in the summertime. I was getting ready to be laid off, and I didn't want to be laid off. I wanted a job that would continue on. So I was hired by our local street department to be a street sweeper, and then in the winter months, go with the snowplow drivers or do whatever needed to be done, of course, as you do as a general laborer with the street department.
Mhm.
Just after that, in looking towards the end of April of 1976, they were looking for another dispatcher and someone to help clean up the records room. It was like probably a lot of places back in the day. You had cards, arrest cards that you would make, but they needed to be re-alphabetized, and some of the older ones taken and archived or whatever. So I was hired in 1975, in May of 1975, to become a communications. Well, at that time, it definitely was just a dispatcher, I would guess. Communications officer would be a stretch, I think, at that point.
Mhm.
Um, so that's where I started basically my public safety career, is being a dispatcher, and was there until the end of September and beginning in October of 1977. I went on the road as a police officer and spent then, well, till the end of 2011 at the police department.
Man, so okay, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
So your time before going into dispatching, and the only reason I want to bring this up is because it makes me think about a time when I was headed to dispatch, and this so when I dispatched, it was in Michigan. Started out in Florida and then ended it in Michigan, in my home state. Excuse me, actually the county that I grew up in. But I remember heading to dispatch once, and it was blizzard like weather. Like the road was ice. I couldn't see. I remember having to kind of poke my head out a little bit to see a little bit better. And
Exactly.
I remember on the side of the road is a huge plow truck that is
Okay.
flipped on its side, and the driver is standing on top on his phone. And I remember freaking out and thinking, if he can't get through this, how the hell am I going to get through this to get to dispatch?
That's exactly right. In the blizzard of 78, I believe
Mhm.
it was. Um, it was we were in uh, for 4 days until such time a National Guard troop transport was able to come down a road that was probably 50 yards from my house, and I had to walk out with another officer lived just catty corner from me, and neither one of us could get into work at that point. And yeah, it was kind of desperate at different times, especially when you see the snowplow driver, sitting on its side. That's kind of a bad deal. That's kind of a clue, is what we would say in the business. That gives you a clue.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All I could think was that because I made it, I ended up making it into dispatch, and I'm just in this little four-door sedan, and I made it. And I remember telling that story, and I thought, man, the Lord really knew that I needed to get there to help anybody else who was out on the road because I made it.
Yeah. Well, when I was a dispatcher back in 76 or 77, we had a pretty bad snowstorm, and the road basically was closed. So people were being diverted, of course, into town, which was very fortunate for us, of course. So they had opened the National Guard Armory for those folks that to be able to stay there, because of course you couldn't get anywhere on the interstate. So I had a lot of people coming in, just the same kind of thing. They couldn't get it. Semis were blocking, and it was just horrible conditions. And so, yeah, it's kind of a bad deal.
Yeah, for sure. Now, looking at the beginning when you're in dispatch, how was that for you in the beginning? Like, can you, for those who are listening and watching, what one, what was it like?
Okay.
But two, what is it that you're looking at? Because I'm thinking about how dispatch was for me and the amount of screens that I'm looking at, but
Oh,
what are you looking at when you
we
walk in?
had a lot of screens, which I guess would have been just one of those large screens like you used to watch 8 millimeter films on. That would be the only screen that would be in my area at all, which would be down a hall. But
Mhm,
no, we had no computer screens. We had nothing. We had nothing except for a. We did have one at that point was I believe a CRT that was set up on the computer, so you could actually see. But it was the green tone letters, white and green, and that would come across. So if I was sitting here where I am, in front of me was a desk.
mhm.
One CRT was on there. I had a phone that was on the right hand side up on a wall with, I believe, two lines, and a box, of course, a box of computer paper, and a 2740 machine, which that basically was the computer and then the printer that was assigned to it. And that was pretty much it. A little room. People would come into our lobby, which wasn't huge, of course. Of course, our department wasn't very large, the actual space. But people would come to the window. Then I'd get up and go over and see what they'd need. And then to the rear of me was our what was called the records room, where we kept case reports and things like that. But when complaints would come in, I had a sheet that was probably 4 inches wide by 6 inches long, I guess, something like that. And it was just called a general complaint sheet. I would have to write. You hand wrote everything, of course. Write their name, their address, what the actual complaint was. And we had three different hooks: 6 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 6. And you'd hang it on that particular hook. And the people coming in, the guys coming in from the road, would then go up and look through and see what had happened on the shifts before them. So they'd get some idea of what was going on in case something happened and they had to carry on with something. You were hoping that people were passing information on when the new shift came on, but that oftentimes did not happen. And at that time, there were one person, or I'm sorry, two people in a car. We only had, I think, three cars. So it was a different time. No portable radios. And as I said before, we had just a few channels. So, and the other thing that was sitting there was also the Motorola base station. That was it. With one little microphone, you push the button. That was all.
That
Well,
I'm trying to picture all of it.
from where we were to where we are, it's incredible. You're still doing the same job.
Mhm.
I don't think I even had a fire frequency. It was only police and sometimes the ambulance.
What was the call volume like, and how many hours were you working at a time? Was it just you there alone, or were there others?
No, it was just me.
Mhm.
You worked an 8 hour shift. I really can't tell you the call volume, but compared to today, there just wasn't. You were lucky if you had a call. If you worked a Sunday, you were lucky if you got a call on any shift, whether that was 6 to 2, 2 to 10, or overnight going 10 to 6. My shift was 2 days on. I worked Monday, Tuesday days, Wednesday, Thursday night, and did a turnaround on Friday and worked 2 to 10. But I can't tell you the call volume, but it was comparatively speaking, very low.
Man.
And as you know, each individual uh, locality had their own basic setup, like mine. Maybe they had a base station and a microphone.
Mhm.
They would dispatch their own people. I mean, it wasn't consolidated like it is today in most places.
Do you remember any of the calls you took during that time? Like, any that have stuck with you, or even some of the first ones? Like, I'm trying to think in my in my head how, if the call volume wasn't that much, I mean, you were still dealing with the same types of things, but, do you remember any of those calls?
Uh, let's see. We not no, there was not a particular thing that sticks in my mind with regards to anything that was either major. I guess at that point, you had the same types of calls, like you said, uh, but and I'm sure at some point that there was a. I'm sure there were homicides or a homicide, theft calls, and dog calls, things like that everybody gets and just wishes they would go away. But I can't recall a particular call like that when I was dispatching when I was a young police officer. Yes, there were those very memorable things that stick in my mind. Things that you think, how did that happen, or how did we get involved with that, or how does this family get by under their circumstances, let's say.
Right. So you're you're there.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the training like then? What was the training like back then? And the reason I ask is because when I first started out dispatching, and this is 2001 even, when I first started in Central Florida at a small police department, I remember walking in and my trainer showing me everything, right? And then we sit down, he takes a 911 call, and I'm observing, and then he turns around and says, "Okay, you're next." And I thought, "What?"
Well, of course. Yeah, I'm ready. Fired up. I understand now. In my jurisdiction at that time, there was a 911.
Mhm.
There was an emergency line that you called, but we didn't have 911. I think 911 came in 68 or 69, maybe something like that.
Yeah, 68.
And at one point, I know that there was one jurisdiction here in Indiana that was the first to have 911, but it didn't spread throughout the state for quite a while, for a number of years, and we didn't have it. I mean, and my training, let's put it this way, my training was similar to the training that you get with, I guess, as a young police officer at that time. There weren't dedicated CTOs, of course, or FTOs. You just went in and you sat with the person, whoever happened to be there, and they trained you as best they could with regards to everything that you needed to know. Now, of course, at that time, it wasn't as frenzied, most generally, as it can be now. So you had the opportunity to actually talk to the person, and you had, again, probably the most intricate training would have been through for IDACS, Indiana Data and Communication System, which you're aware of, but a lot of people may not be. But it was our statewide, entry point for case reports, runaways, missing persons, and things like that. And that was probably the most involved training. Other than that, I could write. So I could write on that small piece of paper. I knew how to do that. Take a person's phone number, and then hit my one button and say, whatever car or white unit you need to go here. Well, that was pretty much it, except for calls and things like that, and alphabetizing my arrest cards, things like that, gun permits. It just wasn't as involved then as it is now. It's involved, excuse me, and evolved as well. Is it better? It's good to be able to share data. It really is better an easier job to share data now than it was at that point. But you're basically doing the same job, other than the fact that those consolidated CPAT, the centers today, have to do everything for everybody. And that was a lot different at that point, when I only had one small municipal department to have to deal with.
Yeah, it's you take me back a little bit as you're talking about this, because the permits and such. Because I remember at that first dispatch center, or a small police department rather, being in there, and when it was tourist season, people would come in, and even those who were local, they would come in for bike permits. And I remember I'd have to fill out all of those bike permits and give them out, and do all that other stuff, extra patrol, and yeah, you're taking me back.
Did the same thing. We had bicycle stickers. You had to come and register your bicycle. It was 25 cents or something, and you'd write down the serial number and all the information on the bicycle and who the owner was, give them the sticker, and send them on their way. So that was another one of those huge assignments that I had to take care of.
So you end up moving from dispatch and becoming a road officer,
Yes.
how was that transition for you? Because when you're like for myself, or at least those that I used to work with, we would have people who would come into dispatch who were working in like EMS or something.
Right.
And they would come in and say, well, this is what we do out on the road, and we would say, well, this is how we do it inside, and your protocols out there don't work in here because
Oh,
we have our own set. So for what you learned,
you're in a non-visual environment too.
yeah,
Dispatch.
right.
It is a lot different.
Hmm.
Going well. I told you how I became a communications officer or
Yeah,
well, the reason I became a police officer is because it paid more. I mean,
that works.
sure, but I thought, well, it paid probably, I don't know. At that point when I was making, as a dispatcher, I was probably making $4,500 a year, something like that, maybe 5,000, and being a police officer paid maybe seven, something like that. So I thought, hey, why not give it a shot? But I did it, became a firearms instructor, went on to just do all kinds of things. And, some years later in 2011, ended up going to the sheriff's office.
So that transition,
Transition,
yeah,
the transition was good. And I think it was, I think it was good for the other road officers that I worked with because they saw that I had been there and been a dispatcher, knew what to do. And if something came up, I could talk to a complainant knowing what information that somebody might need on the other end of the world. More so today than at that point, because being a communications officer then was sitting there and dispatching the calls. The only thing I could do is I could tell maybe the complainant that if you need to call, this is the known number to call, and this is the information you need to relay to the person that answers that call. Again, it wasn't a consolidated PSAP at that time, but I think that was helpful. I think that was helpful from that end to be able to tell the communications officer on the other end, if you had to call, this is what they need to know. And the old salty police officers that I worked with, they didn't really care much for the communications end. It was just like that was something that was there in the radio room, and but they didn't really care what went on or what we as a dispatcher or communications officer had to know or had to do. They didn't care. They just took care of their things and went on about their way. But I tried to instill in them that you got to think about those things about who the caller is and what they're relaying to the communications person.
so it was beneficial, very beneficial for you to have that. Do you feel like there should be more opportunities for officers to come into dispatch to learn more about what it is that's going on?
We tried to do that. We tried to do that. We have tried to do that with a lot of the departments in our county, and they have been sending new police officers and firefighters into our PSAP for, I don't know, probably at least the last 2 or 3 years as part of their FTO. They do come in and normally spend at least 1 8-hour shift with us and see exactly what is happening on that end. Because folks that have not been into a communication center don't have any idea. When they're calling and we don't answer the first time, and then they call again and are becoming frustrated, they don't realize that we're like the duck on the pond, that our legs are going like this under the water, going as fast as we can, but we are trying to stay as steady and smooth going across that pond as we can, especially during storms and things like that. You know how crazy the centers can be, and so now there is some that is able to give them some understanding of what's going on in the communication center when they are calling in. And also it helps a lot when they're out there thinking, oh gosh, I remember they were getting their asses kicked inside that center. And so I need to be I just have a little bit more patience with regards to the folks.
Yeah, that's one of the big things is having them have that patience when stuff is going on. I remember one time we had a storm, because you bring up storms, and we had a storm that was bad enough that wires and trees down all over the place that we were having a hard time catching up. And there was four of us in there for the entire county.
Right.
And we had a couple officers come in who ended up saying, "Hey, we're coming in. We're going to help you guys with whatever you need." And so they were just taking calls and just writing down where trees were, and we were doing the rest.
Right.
And like within an hour or so, they were done. They didn't want to do it anymore.
It's like, oh, look, that's time to wash my feet, whatever it might be. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's amazing if you can give them just a little bit of education as to what's going on the back end. It really does help. I think we've seen those folks that have come in and spent some time in communications. They have a new respect for what we do in there.
For sure. Now, you end up spending all these years out on the road and such, and then you come back in, you become a director of a communication center. You know, you've got the knowledge from being in dispatch from the beginning and then out there on the road. Do you think having both of those aspects of public safety really helped out during your time as a director?
Well, yes, I think so. I mean, you can go back to the time when I was a dispatcher, and at that time it was, I mean, it was night and day with regards to then and what it was walking into the communications center when I took over as a director. I told the folks that were hiring me, I said, here's the deal. I'm a police guy. All right. I don't know as much about the communications end as I did, 30, 40 years ago. So I can help on the personnel side, but I said, as far as the higher end technologies, I said, I'm just not up to speed with regards to that. And if that's something that you're looking for, I'm not the guy. I'm just not. And they said, no, we really need somebody to come in and take care of those personnel issues and kind of guide the center in that way. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot, see what happens.
Man. So then you come in and you start working on everything. Now you say that, they needed someone to come in and work on the personnel stuff, was and when I was working at the last dispatch center I was at, we had a patch where morale was down. We were trying to figure out how to get everyone lifted back up. Was that kind of how you were coming into this?
Well, the thing is, and to my surprise, the next month it had already been predetermined. They were hiring 5 people. So, and I came in at the very end of January, and about the middle of February of 2012, we had 5 new people. We had no CTOs. We had no. We just had people that had been there a while, and so that's what happened. We had to put. I said, you're kidding, really? That 5 people, and I just started here, and I don't know the lay of the land. And they said, no, we got to get those people going. I said, well, okay. So I leaned a lot on the senior communications officers, and it was very beneficial. If it wasn't for them, I probably would not have been there maybe 2 months, because they helped me tremendously get through those everything I needed to know about the communications center. They helped a lot. And to start those other 5 people, that was the other thing. We had to juggle where we were going to put 5 people at one time and get those shifts taken care of. Then eventually, of course, we started, got CTOs. We got trained CTOs. And it was what I would call challenging at the time. And not dealing in police world, solely dealing in police world, you were now dealing with police, fire, and EMS world. And those were 3 completely different animals. And I think probably across the United States, I would guess, not just Indiana, but the same thing I would imagine holds true. You'll find that fire departments are pretty territorial. They want their particular areas, and if somebody encroaches into their area, things get a little salty. So it was a completely different world for me, and I just had to figure it out. and do the best we could possibly do.
So you're coming in and, and doing this. You've got 5 people, but now you're also adding all of these different disciplines, and there's all different types of politics that go in with that
Well,
as well.
you bet. Yeah. Oh no. As I said, if I didn't have a lot of the backing of those communications officers, I probably wouldn't have been there more than a couple of months. I really probably would not have. But we were able to get things rolling, got on the right foot, got those folks trained, and you just do what you have to do to the best of your ability. So that's kind of the way that it was.
How many years did you were you director then?
About 8.5. About 8.5 years.
You stayed.
Yes, I did. We got through, and of course, as the things progressed, we changed CAD systems. We changed emergency and medical dispatch system. Things changed and evolved, and as we talk about those different systems that we have in place now, of course, our sheriff was very forward thinking and very technologically based. And once we got into the different systems and the different, especially the CAD system, he wanted to be on the cutting edge. He always has wanted to be on the cutting edge of whatever project that we were doing, to work smarter and not harder. But the codicil to that is the folks in dispatch, when we would say, okay, we are going to be the beta testing site for this particular product, whatever it would be, it was just like looks of, oh my gosh, here we go again. Because beta testing, things don't always work like they're supposed to work. So being the first person in line was sometimes kind of painful. That did have payoffs at the end, but I would have preferred to be probably number 3 in line when we were going with a brand new product, that kind of thing. Something somebody else had taken over the headaches that we didn't particularly need.
So for those who for those who are watching and listening, 'cause there's a lot of people in the general public who watch and listen as well. Can you explain what CAD is and what it's like when you're making a transition from one system to another? Because I remember when we did it, and it was a pain in the ass. And there was, we would have a few consoles up, one would be down, and then it would get crazy busy in there. And 911, where's your emergency? Or also 911, where's your emergency? And do you have an emergency? And a lot of people would say, no, wait a minute, I'm calling 911, right? And it's like, well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the CAD system is their computer aided dispatch. When somebody would call, if you're out there in the community and you call in, then they are going to the communications officer is going to take your information and enter it into the computer aided dispatch system. And that's just the record keeping system for that. And now it has become not just that, but dispatches fire. We have locution that is also integrated with our computer-aided dispatch system. So that's automatic fire dispatching for you folks out there that don't know what locution is. And transitioning from one CAD vendor to another, as Ricardo alluded to, it is sometimes challenging. Well, I won't say it's sometimes challenging. It's very challenging because you have data that you had from the prior the CAD system that you had, and transferring it over into the new system does not go quite as smoothly as everybody hopes. And as also you alluded to, that's the same thing when you're bringing up a new, whether it's the Motorola Vesta system or whatever anybody might have with regards to that. Any system change like that, it's problematic. It just is. And everybody knows it's going to be. Even if you have had a CAD system, the same one for who knows, 5 years, 10 years, and they go through an upgrade, that is also seems to be problematic. Only because there are certain files or things that that didn't get turned over, even though there might have been behind the scenes testing by the vendor and said, yes, we're all ready to go. When you put it in your environment, it may be a lot different because you're talking about different ways that the systems are built on the back end. You might have your own system, or you may be part of a statewide system, and it's just different. And files don't get transferred over, and things become a little dicey.
Yes, very. And for those who are listening and watching, the other piece of that as well is if you're upgrading your phone system, in dispatch, when they're upgrading their phone system, their call handling equipment. I remember testing, working within digital and testing that stuff out, and being at excuse me, at a dispatch center. And I don't know if I've told this story before for those who are watching and listening, but I'm testing, and I've got my coworkers who are testing on the other end, and they said, "Okay, we're going to send in a test call." And I said, "Okay." So I go ahead and I pick up, 911, where's your emergency? And it was a real call. It was one that just happened to squeak through. Yeah, it was, and
Perfect.
and I I had just been out of dispatch, and working for in digital for maybe 6 months or something. So, I still had, and I don't know, I still have my skills anyway. I'll always have those skills, but I was fresh out of dispatch, and I'm sitting there, and they're yelling already and saying, "You need to get somebody out of here. She just hit me over the head. We just got out of court right now." And I'm like, "Holy crap." And their whole computer system was down at
Sure.
the time because we're doing the phones. So I've got I bust out a paper pad and a pen, and I start writing everything down. Okay, description, location, everything. And she was already gone. She wasn't in the area. He didn't need EMS. She just kind of slapped him is all it really was, but he wanted an officer. So after I got off the phone and made sure he was safe and all and got her direction to travel, I look at the dispatcher that's there and I said, "Hey, this was actually a real call. Here you go."
Yeah, take this. And we've had to do that. We've had to revert back to pen and paper different times when the system, when if we're going through an upgrade, and they were going to have to do something uh, a lot more intricate with the server. They'd say, "Okay, here's the deal. You may be down for up 1 to 2 hours. At least you're going to be able to stay up, but you're not going to be able to input any calls, and the people on the road aren't going to be able to utilize anything." So we would go to pen and paper and write things down, and then when we had the ability to when the server would come back up and CAD would come back up, we would then input those calls, and that's just the way it happens. Sometimes it just happens that way. Even as far forward as we are now today, we still have to at times revert back to the pencil and paper, pen and paper.
Of course. And that's something for those who are listening and watching to remember as well, is when you're calling in, if for some reason, things might be taking a little bit longer than you expect, it's probably because this type of thing is happening. Like you have no idea, but maybe, the CAD system has gone down and we're reverting back to uh, you know, original gangster style, OG style, the beginning.
Exactly. And people have to realize too, those folks that are out there just in the public that haven't been either a public safety officer or in communications, if you're driving down the interstate and you see a crash and you call it in, understand that you're probably not the only person on the interstate driving along that's calling in that crash. So if the dispatcher is very short and says to you, "You're calling about the crash at the 141 mile marker," yes, and then you've disconnected. They're not being rude. It's just we've got to get the folks on the way, get that taken care of. And yes, we've had 12 other calls before your call came in.
For sure. Yeah. I used to tell people all the time, and someone might think I'm being a jerk, but I would tell them, they're going as fast as they can to get to you. They're not just waiting on the other side. There are other emergencies that are going on all at the same time. Your emergency is not the only one, but we're getting someone to you as fast as possible. And a lot of times being real like that and straightforward, the caller would be like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, exactly. And, we do. We have those folks that do exactly the same thing, but um, just want folks to realize that when you call in, you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, no matter what you're calling in about. Maybe it's the prettiest blue sky, the most beautiful day, and you don't have anything going on in your world, and you're wanting to know about, Aunt Mabel's cat. You're kind of concerned about that. Well, in the back end, all hell may be breaking loose in our center because there's some other emergency on the other side of the county, and we're getting our butts kicked.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're in, and this has happened to me before in the dispatch center, but you're in your county complex and someone just happens to bulldoze a main line or something, and then everything goes down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Things like that. Technology is great when it works, and when it doesn't, then it just kind of hamstrings you sometimes, and you have to do the best you can with what you've got.
Right, exactly. And speaking of technology, as we kind of segue now into this, during your time there as well, um, you know, you all ended up using text to 911. And this is just another way for people to get into emergency services when voice isn't enough. You've got this as well. Now, I would go to, let's just say, for example, the gas station. I just go to the gas station, and I would have at that time my InDigital Polo on,
Right?
and they would say, "What is that? What does InDigital do?" And I would give them a scenario instead of saying, exactly just a blanket of what I do. I would give them a scenario and say, let's think about if someone ever broke into your house and you were hiding, you know, you want to get help, right? So would you call 911, or would you want another way to do that? And they would say, well, what other way? And I said, well, what if you had the ability to text to 911? And they said, well, why would I want to do that? And I said, well, again, would you want them to hear you when you're trying to call for help? And they would say, oh, I guess I never thought about that. Yeah. Do we have something like that? And then I would say, well, at least in the state of Indiana, it's been around since 2013.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I'll tell you, you talk about people across the United States, the different people that you talk to.
Mhm.
Sometimes they think the folks that are from the Midwest, whether that be Ohio or Kentucky or Indiana, wherever, they think, you guys don't, we're on the East Coast, we're on the West Coast, we know everything. We're good. You guys are just in Podunkville. And I said, and I would tell people, does your state have text to 911 for all of the entities in your state? Well, I don't know, but I don't think so. And I said, well, there you go. Indiana was the leader for text to 911 in the entire United States, and the first state to be completely built out in texting to 911. And that's a really important technology. It has paid off big dividends. I said, so there you go. It's huge. The IA911 board. It's been great. It really has. It's been great partnerships. I know that through InDigital what kind of great partnerships we've had with the board.
Yeah, the board has been excellent. They've been, forward thinking, just everything, how they do what it is that they do. And it's, their board, their top people they come from the dispatch center, whether it be law enforcement on the road or in the actual center as a director and such. So there's all of this that's getting poured into it. Again, being on the cutting edge and everything of technology, for you, if you can, kind of think back a little bit, do you remember some of the texting sessions that came in that your dispatchers are working with?
Probably I'm thinking the third or fourth 911 call that we came in. It was an actual 911 call.
Mhm.
And the communications officer just had that, as they do, get that feeling that something's just not right here. So she utilized the text to 911 to contact that person back and said, is everything okay there? And the person was hesitant, but they said yes. And she said, are you sure? She typed back, are you sure that everything is okay? And the person paused and then typed back, no, things are really bad. It's a domestic situation. It's physical. And so anyway, she was able to send the police out there, and arrest was made, and things worked out better than your normal call. If we would have just left it, and our communications officer would have just said, okay, then that would have been it. But that wasn't it. And the result was good for that family. Got taking care of a domestic abuse situation. And the other thing that you'll find, at least in the state of Indiana, I know people were thrilled to get text to 911 because we had so many butt dials. And on the butt dial scene, somebody calls, and for those folks that don't know exactly what that is, you've got your cell phone and it's in your back pocket or it's wherever, and all of a sudden it just automatically dials 911. Excuse me. We didn't know exactly what to do. So what we did, before that, we would call back. Well, nobody answers. Nobody answered their cell phone. They didn't care. They didn't know who was calling them, so they didn't answer. However, when text 911 came in and they saw that if we texted it back and said, we're calling from the communication center, this is from the communication center, do you have an emergency? They would immediately, almost immediately, text back and say, I'm sorry, it was inadvertent. I didn't mean to. And no, I don't have an emergency here. And if you knew the situation was probably, if you could hear people's feet crunching under leaves or snow, you figured that, yes, they probably are okay, and it wasn't an actual emergency. If we had any question whatsoever, of course, we would dispatch somebody to their location. But those particular kinds of things became almost obsolete with the text to 911.
Yeah, there's a couple things here that I want to mention. One is, why do you, and well, this is just a question to you. What do you think it is that makes people respond more to a text than a voice? When you're trying to call back, yeah, I dealt with that all the time. But when you're texting,
I think texting, everybody has texting. They just do. And I think that it's almost like a Pavlov response, is that all of a sudden they get the text and immediately they pick up their phone and see what it is. Phone calls, not so much anymore. It seems like those people that are responding to the text know that folks that they like that are in their circle, it might be one of those folks texting them. The phone call, it could be a robocall, it could be anything.
Mhm.
Text alert to them, then they would immediately look at that. I think that's probably the reason. I don't know that for sure, but I'm just
yeah, it almost seems like people think it's more anonymous when I mean, it's really not, but because we
well,
got your phone number.
but yeah, but I really think that's probably it.
Mhm.
Sure, but because of all the robocalling, it's just inundated with robocalls all the time. Um, I think that they think that it's somebody that they know, probably trying to reach out to them.
Now, do you think it's a little harder when doing, conversation in text to 911, or even text from 911, where it's, dispatch is able to initiate a text from 911, a session to that texter? Do you think that it's harder in a way because the human element is kind of taken away, where, like you were kind of saying, when you get a voice call and it's an open line, you can hear everything that's going on, so you can tell whether something is, amiss or something.
Sure, and as you know, when the text of 911 was coming to Indiana, the voice is best. Voice was always best if you're going to contact the center via 911. But when you can't, that's when you should text to 911, because, as you said, the voice will give you inflections. It will
Mhm.
give you those clues in the background that you might hear that you wouldn't be able to, of course, hear on a texting session. But yeah, I mean, to have both of those options available is just awesome. It really is.
I fully agree with you. It's an amazing thing to have, because I think about when I was in dispatch and such, and especially now with even location accuracy being so much better, that we're able to locate people instead of having a call come in and me there trying to get information or trying to find somebody, trying to taking more time to get to one of the cell phone companies, one of the providers, to ping that phone to try to get a better location or something. But now, you know, it's it's a lot easier.
Oh, sure. It's a lot easier, and it is a lot better to be able to have. Sometimes sometimes they would look and think, are there too many tools in the toolbox? Because we have so many systems and so many things that you're dealing with in the communication center. But this particular tool is a gem. It really is.
Now, thinking about all the technology that's happened from when you began in public safety in general, and then up to the point where you retired out, um, with the technology that's coming in, we're talking about text to 911 right now, but let's kind of jump in a little further and look at just the aspect of mental health and wellness for dispatchers and call takers. You've got video, live streams, pictures, all
Right.
of this that's coming in. How do you think that's going to affect dispatchers and call takers? And as a former director, what do directors need to do looking into that future to help their dispatchers and call takers to be able to handle all of that and manage the stress that comes from it?
But overall, just as it depends on, there are boards, there are people that are, at least in Indiana, are under the auspices of the sheriff's office. Um, as an entity, the leaders need to take a look at a wellness program overall, just for all of their employees. I was very fortunate uh, to be in a center and be with a department that the sheriff took the lead, not just here, but nationally, as an advocate for wellness and well-being, all in all aspects, but especially in the wellness of mental health, and trying to erase the stigma that if something is going, if you don't feel good or something's wrong, instead of keeping it bottled up inside, you need to talk to somebody. And if that's a friend, if that's a pastor, if that's a whomever, and if that doesn't work, we now, or the department has the option to actually talk to a professional, and so many sessions will be paid for by the department. And that's the kind of thing that needs to happen. People don't realize, especially as we talked about communications today. You're working in a non-visual environment. If something happens, if you take a call and your child is choking, and you help that person through, but yet the child might still be in distress, you oftentimes in the center have no idea what the outcome of that is. Or God forbid, a police officer, firefighter, medic uh, be killed on the line of duty, and maybe you were the last voice that they had, either on the radio or on the telephone. That's really traumatic in anybody's business, but with us in particular, and as close as everybody is within that, within the field, um, those things over time, even though you may not know it, if your coworkers see something, if your supervisor sees something, it's incumbent upon those folks to take it to whatever level needs to be taken to get those folks help, because you cannot bottle those things up inside of you for very long at all, or it's going to take a huge toll on your overall health.
I fully agree. I think to your point, it also starts. It really does start at the top. As long as your directors and everything are doing what they should be doing, for all of their call takers and dispatchers, I think everyone is going to be okay. And I also think, in a way, in a weird way, and people might hate this part of this, but I think that because one of the big things is that dispatch doesn't get closure, right? We were just talking about that. You just mentioned that we don't get the closure. We don't know what happens, but in a weird way, being able to see some of this stuff, I think will help a little bit with that closure piece. Um, then again, there's a lot that ends up going through it, but I think knowing at least part of it will help with the closure portion.
I agree. I agree. But that is a tough thing, as we talked about, in a non-visual environment, you take that call, uh, you have no idea what happened there. It might bother you. You may not know. Now, ultimately, you may be able to find out what happened, but to take a call of, we've had some pretty heinous calls, and to have that just stuck in the back of your head, and you think, boy, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to look weak. I don't want to look like I can't handle it, and just bottle all those things up. That is a terrible, terrible thing. And again, the department that I have been with is very forward thinking with regards to those things.
That is awesome. And that's definitely what is needed out there. More departments and everything that are forward thinking like that, to be able to continue to help dispatchers and call takers, just sharing stories. This what I've been doing for a long time, just sharing stories and sharing stories. And as soon as you share those, you're able to handle and manage, it a lot better. The IM91 movement was really, it started out as a reclassification issue, and it's still, used for it for awareness, but really it turned into peer support, and that was a big
I,
thing. It's still going.
yeah, we have peer support teams within the department as well. And let me just stop for a moment and
Hmm.
talk about the IM 911 movement and what you have done with regards to the IM 911 movement and the reclassification. That's another one of those steps where, those people in Indiana don't know exactly what's going on. We're the first state in the United States, I believe, to reclassify communications officers as public safety personnel and versus being clerical. That's a huge step forward. It's for morale, for folks to think, okay, yeah, I'm not just a clerical worker. I am with everybody else. I'm like a police officer, firefighter, an EMS worker, and that's the way it should be. Because I said, how often do you see a firefighter driving around the street in his fire truck and see a fire, or a police officer that's going by someplace and see a burglary in progress? Those things are just very few and far between. We in communications get all of that. Everybody calls, and then we send the folks out. So of course we're the first responders. That's I tell everybody, I said, I'm so proud of you because I said you are the true first responders.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. And Indiana is definitely one of the first states. Texas got theirs, and I believe Idaho, California is working on theirs. West Virginia has one out there. There's a gentleman named Jim Brown who has done excellent work out there. And there's other states that are coming on and coming on, and it's really good to be able to see this happen, and for dispatchers and call takers to get that recognition. Now, federally, it'll be awesome for that act to end up going through, but state-wise, all of these states that are doing this, it's amazing work. As we go into the wrap up of this episode, it's been awesome to have you on and talk about all of these things. You brought me back to a lot to a few things that I remember.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I love it. It's great. Now you also do community outreach. So for those who are watching and listening, and as we go into this wrap up of this episode, for the community outreach piece, what is it that you can give, advice or whichever, for those who are calling in to 911 when they have an emergency, to make for both sides a better, a more smooth experience?
If they and what one of the things I'm going to try to do, of course, I'm going to talk about some systems, the new system that we're going to be implementing, as well as some of the things that we already have. I just want them to understand, especially the people out there in the different groups that we'll be speaking with, that when you call in, please understand, and as well as I do, Ricardo, that at times when people would call in, they need to realize that first of all, we have a recorded message. Our communications officers have recorded their greetings. So if they'll say, people will try to talk over the initial greeting. So that's pretty important to know that you're going to hear an initial greeting, then you have that live person on the line. So please, I understand that maybe you're in a situation that is what you feel is an emergency. That give that person time to answer, and then they're going to ask specific questions. And because it's scripted, the way that we are is it's scripted in a lot of ways. Please listen to what they're asking and just go ahead and tell them. Don't become upset, and just go through, because there are certain things that we have to ask and certain pieces of information that we have to get in order to get you the help that you need. We've got to find your location. We've got to know where you are is the key. Because if we don't know where you are, then that's not going to do much good. But with regards to outreach, those are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about. The systems, just make sure when you call in that I'm going to tell them, kind of how the call is going to go, no matter what it is. If it's an emergency, or if it's just a standard, my neighbor's burning trash over here, whatever. But just know that there are certain ways that we are going to answer the phone and certain questions that we're going to ask. And please, we may ask them twice because we have to verify. The way that our system is, we need verification for those things so that we make sure that we're getting you the help that you need and to the right location.
Awesome. Well, thank you again very much, Tom, for being on. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope you had fun too, man. It was good hearing about all of this and learning about you, learning more about you, versus the sessions that we were in on
Oh,
together.
sessions. Yes, we did.
They were all,
Because we talked about, for the wellness portion, it is extremely important for those type of sessions to happen where you can bring up a story and someone can relate exactly to what that other person's saying, going, I'm not the only one. I am not the only person that's been through that. And it's good to hear and be able to let off some steam. And
for sure.
that's a good thing. It's good things that you do, Ricardo. I'm telling you,
No,
the
thank you.
the IM 911 initiative, awesome.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. And I will be right back here with you. For those who are watching, man, this was excellent here. To learn more about Tom and all, and his story. And yeah, we were in a couple a couple sessions for Imagine Listening and open mic. It was awesome. Um for those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that'll be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Let me throw this up here really quick. There it is, wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, that is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook, that is facebook.com/within the trenches podcast. This episode is sponsored by In Digital as well as Rapid Deploy, and this show will always be free. However, if you're looking for any bonus material, early ad-free episodes, early access to those episodes, they come out a week earlier than everybody else gets them. There's also discounts to the store, swag, t-shirts, behind the scenes series, all types of stuff. You can visit us on patreon.com/WTT podcast and look at the different offerings that are there as well. So thank you very much to the patrons. I wouldn't be able to do everything that I do without all of you, as well as sponsors. So thank you so much. And this can be viewed on Facebook and YouTube. And the audio portion can be heard 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. Now let's talk to you soon.